Well, hello, Viva Birdos. We are back again with another VEB Podcast, and I'm here with some of our minor league experts on the site. We've got one of our newest writers, Adam Akbani, is with us. How's it going, Adam?
It's been going good, Jason. How about yourself?
Doing well. Blake Newberry as well. You all know Blake. And yeah, he is freshly shorn. For those watching, you can see the haircut. For those listening, you can only imagine how good he looks. Hey, Blake.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah. And then returning to the site, one of our favorite guests. We love him so much and hate him at the same time. No, Kyle Reis is with us from Birds on the Black. Kyle, how is the GIFing computer doing these days?
It is currently in use, so feel good about that for yourselves.
Yeah.
And just very excited to be here with you guys because Blake is awesome. I'm anxious to get to know Adam, and Jason is very white.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to play the idiot here because when it comes to minor league stuff, I really like to talk about things that I don't know enough about. And I really honestly rely on these guys to tell me everything that I need to know for my articles and posts. As you guys know, I am more major league focused, but all these guys we're going to talk about today probably will have a chance to impact the majors at some point. So it's worth us knowing. This is our minor league preview for the minor league season. And what I thought we would do is just go level by level, starting with the AAA team down in Memphis, and then hit AA, Advanced A, Palm Beach, maybe even talk about the complex. And then over on the site, many of you submitted questions, and so we will be asking these experts the questions that you all submitted for the minor league system. And yeah, let's just kind of jump right in. I think this is going to be a fascinating season down in the minors. Personally, there's a lot of prospects to talk about. What are you guys excited about before we jump to the questions? What are you excited about this minor league system and group of teams that we have here today? And I'm going to start with our guests. So Kyle, jump in.
Nothing. I'm excited about everything, right? For me, I think that the draft picks from the 2022 draft are all going to be fascinating to watch. I think that's where a lot of my early season attention has been.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much at Palm Beach. But I think aside from how Mason Wynn continues to develop, we've already started to see him adjust at the plate. But I think beside that, the other thing that my attention is on is the relief pitching in the organization and some of those prospects. I think that's where, obviously the starting depth is a huge issue, but I think that's where most of my attention is and what I'm most interested to see develop and how it develops throughout the season.
Fascinating. Yeah. Blake, what about you?
Yeah, I agree completely with Kyle on that, but I also want to add, I think this year's crop of minor league free agents is super interesting. I think Logan Sawyer is a super interesting name. You've got a guy like Guillermo Zuniga, who we all watched in the World Baseball Classic, pump 102 with nasty sliders. And even like going further down, I know Jose Martinez he's in AA now. He sits kind of in the mid 90s. Potential can hit higher. And then I know Ryan Shreve was another guy we grabbed in the minor league Rule 5, and he's a guy that's super interesting because he did really well in high A, never got promoted, then got time in the Rule 5 and then wasn't protected from the minor league portion, or got time in the Arizona Fall League and then wasn't protected from the minor league portion of the Rule 5. So I'm curious to see how he is too. So I'll be looking at that this year as well.
Yeah, by the way, I just had to look it up. I'm assuming this is the same Colin Sawyer. He finally has a Facebook or a Fangraphs page up, 2.1 innings down in Springfield, 19.29 K per nine. But with an ERA. So he must have given up some runs. Is that the same Logan Sawyer?
Yeah, same Logan Sawyer. His last outing was rough. I think he gave up like 3 runs or something.
Yeah.
I think it's the like 5 Ks and 2 1/3 or something like that to start the year. So
yeah.
It's kind of early to draw conclusions, but I'm excited.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I just want to make sure his page was up there because it had.
Yeah, he's up there now. Earlier. So it's great.
So yeah, it's good to see that guy going FIP of 3.26, which is very significant in 2.1 innings. Very significant. That's going to hold up. All right, Adam, what you got, man? What are you looking forward to this minor league season?
Yeah, so for me, the name of the game is going to be which guys out of EST are going to come out and jump straight to jump straight to single A and really perform. I mean, you saw last year, the new trend is really promoting guys who are high exit velo guys who can really pop at the age of 17. Guys like Jackson Churio really play out and make it to single A. For the Cardinals, it was Leonardo Bernal. But obviously, it hasn't really been anyone just yet. Obviously, you'll see you'll play plenty of guys as the season plays out. And I'm really excited for Jonathan Mejia and Jose Suarez. These are guys that we see are probably the more advanced of the 17-year-olds now turning 18 that we have on the team. So just looking at especially Suarez with that higher exit velo, and he led the DSL squad in ISO power. So I'm really excited to see, once they get their shots at stateside ball, I'm really want to see what they can really perform to. So really just kind of see how much, what kind of lottery tickets are going to be able to hit are always things that I look forward to. We see the Cardinals have a lot of success now with the pitching profile. Now I remember talking before, pre Randy Flores, I wasn't, and even 1 year with Randy Flores, I wasn't super fond of the command control profile, but now we're seeing them prioritize power over commands, especially with that Bryson Motts and the Cooper Hairpiece selection. So those are two pitching prospects that I'm very, very excited going forward. So it's really just the young guys that are fresh Cardinals, guys from the Dominican, and guys who are straight out of college that I'm really going to be looking forward to, especially with that new outlook and what the pitching profile is really going to look like going forward. I think it's going to be matching a lot of what new teams are really going for. And I'm really excited for that. So,
yeah. All right, well, let's jump in. There's our little intro. Let's go on to AAA Memphis.
Jason, real fast before, what are you most interested in? As maybe not like a minor league guy, but as a baseball fan, what are you most interested in?
I think I'm most interested in seeing kind of where some of these prospects that are on the edge, on the verge of land. Like I want to see what Moises Gomez does in his second year. Not in his second year, but I mean second year in Memphis, pushing the majors. I've been tracking Liberatore since the trade, and so looking into the core of his stats has been fascinating. Watching some of the baseball savant stuff is up there now for Memphis and AAA, and seeing his movement profiles, seeing things like that. That's interesting to me. And then I've got my favorites, and sometimes I kind of root. No, I wouldn't say the underdog, because that's not really what I mean, but it seems like Ivan Herrera has, I wouldn't say fallen out of favor. I don't mean it that way, but can't seem to get that leg up that like Mason Wynn and Jordan Walker had. So I'm really rooting for, Ivan Herrera this year, and some of the relievers too, Jake Walsh and some guys like that I want to see in the major leagues. I still like Cody Whitley, so things like that. And then down, I could go a little farther down, Tink Hintz and others, but mostly it's those guys that are right there on the cusp that I want to see take a step forward and maybe impact the major leagues at maybe the halfway point this season, or, even become starters next year. So
awesome. Cool.
Yeah. All right, to Memphis. So two things we're going to do here for each level. I want to hear about key prospects. And literally, I mean, by key prospects, I mean the guys that everyone will know. So feel free to mention, for example, in AAA, Mason Wynn, like that. That's what we want to know. And then also other players to watch. So let's just talk, and I'll let just any of you jump in here. Key prospects to watch from the Memphis Redbirds down there. A short drive, by the way. I'd recommend everyone go down to Memphis for the weekend, catch some barbecue, catch some blues, and catch the Redbirds play. So key prospects to watch at Memphis.
I mean, you got Liberatore, you've got Graceffo, Ivan Herrera, Mason Wynn, and Moises Gomez. I think we've talked about all of those except Graceffo so far. But Memphis is kind of a hotbed of talent, it feels like, a little bit with some of these prospects. There's a lot of the guys who are kind of bigger names, and a lot of the guys we're obviously going to see in the majors. I think Liberatore maybe sooner rather than later, or a guy like Graceffo who's maybe pushing for a spot in the rotation next year. Mason Wynn, who's going to have to force his way into the infield somehow. And then Ivan Herrera, who could be a backup catcher to Wilson Contreras here at some point. So it'll be interesting to see which of those guys can make the jump this year and actually get themselves into some playing time.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you guys before we spread around. I'm just going to jump onto one guy. Herrera was sent out from camp, I felt like, a little early, personally. Probably that had to do with them liking what they saw from, I've already forgotten his name, Trey Barrera. Yeah. Which I didn't really understand, but you can't have enough catchers in an organization, so it was fine. What does Ivan Herrera need to continue to work on in order to really catch the attention of the major league staff and push Andrew Kisner, who's probably going on his 5th or 6th season in a row of negative WAR value? It seems like shouldn't be that hard to push him, but yet Herrera can't seem to do it. So
I think for me, it's just him being an overall all around catcher. I think it's going to be having to work on a little bit of everything. But if I had to pinpoint one thing, it's probably going to be that exit velo, right? Last year he only had about 12 batted balls, but he never really had anything above 105. And even then, he was never known as anything more than maybe a 50 max EV guy. Never really hitting anything over 110 miles an hour as an amateur, anything, not an amateur, but in double and triple A this year. So if he really wants to take that next step in his offensive profile, I think the bat to ball will come as he plays more, as he gets more ABs. But I think really working on that bat speed and that bat to ball profile in combination is going to be his biggest key going forward. But overall, just a little bit of everything. If he really wants to take over Andrew Kisner, it'll happen at some point this year. But I do believe Kisner's days are numbered as the backup catcher.
Kyle?
It seems like to me that it really comes down to how he handles the pitching staff. I'm with Adam. I think, watching him develop his offensive profile is going to be huge, especially in limited at bats as a backup to Wilson Contreras. But it doesn't seem, and it's hard for a young player a young catcher to develop chemistry with major league pitchers. So what he's going to need to do is just show that he can handle a pitching staff in small and short glimpses and very, very quickly when he is eventually brought up to the major league for whatever reason. I think, to me, that's going to be the biggest key for him, is showing his preparedness behind the plate, and maybe some of the connections that he's making with the pitching staff in order to stick once he does make that jump again.
Yeah, and I think what's nice about Herrera too, now that the Cardinals signed Wilson Contreras, they don't necessarily have to be patient with him anymore. It's as soon as he shows that he can handle the major leagues at a reasonably competent level, they can just bring him up, because Contreras is on a contract for so long that it's not like Herrera's going to have to be a starter anytime soon. So I think when he's ready, that's kind of when he's going to surpass Kisner and Barrera, if he has. Well, he's already had a Barrera, but
yeah. So in your guys' opinion, and any one of you can answer this, would you guys say that right now Herrera's not ready for the majors and shouldn't be up there?
I would say he's not ready yet. I think he's going to need some more playing time in AAA.
Okay, fair. Kyle?
I always err on the side of caution. With development.
Yeah.
And when you think about him, because he was so young and he advanced through the minors so quickly with that 2020 lost season in the middle of it all, and especially with the demands of the catcher position, I say be as conservative with them as you possibly can, especially with the money you pumped into Contreras, and also having Trey Barrera there to fill a couple innings here and there if Kiz doesn't, square it away or whatever. Like, for me, I still view him the way I view Matthew Liberatore. I think they're both still on schedule. It's just that there was a lot of obstacles in the way to get him there. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. By the way, just to add a little context for those that don't know, Herrera, we're talking about a 23-year-old. So for a catcher, that's still really young.
A month younger than Nolan Gorman.
Yeah. Liberatore, Nolan Gorman, who you might say, well, Gorman's been in the majors now for 2 seasons. Yeah, but Herrera's a catcher. So you just got to have a different timeline. Liberatore, despite us knowing about him since he was in A-ball and going through the pandemic, he's only 23. So, I mean, Adam Wainwright didn't debut till age 24. So, even if he doesn't make it this season, although all indications are that he's going to be back with the majors at some point, not exactly pushing the timeline envelope here for either of those guys. Okay, I got a question for you. Just talking about this, what's better? You can just go right now because this is going to change a little bit as we go through. What's better, Memphis's rotation or Memphis's lineup?
Blake.
Geez, that's tough. I'll say Memphis's lineup, because I'm pretty high on Gomez winning Herrera, and then Luke and Baker just mashes.
Yeah, Baker's having a good season.
I think that top of the lineup's going to be really good. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, I would agree with Blake wholeheartedly. To me, especially as the Cardinals start looking for pitching at the major league level, the most important prospect in the organization that hasn't made a major league debut is Moises Gomez, because we know that the Cardinals love dealing from depth, and the more depth they have in the outfield, the more likely they are to make a significant trade, the more likely they are to move one of those outfielders that matter. And Moises Gomez is so important to me, and I only bring him up to say that maybe not even like the third most exciting player in that lineup. That is a fun, exciting lineup, and even like Unial Karakudo is kind of a fun older minor league journeyman utility player. Like I've really enjoyed watching him play the field specifically. So even some of the players that are maybe also rans in the minor league level, they're fun to watch and fun to take weird at bats in the minors.
Yeah. Yeah. I just going through the rotation. I don't know that I can get to all five, but right now you've got Hudson, you've got Liberatore, you've got Griseppo. I'm assuming you've got Connor Thomas, although I haven't seen much from Thomas yet. I mean, stats don't always run past my view. And then who am I missing? Who would be five?
It was Tommy Parsons.
Oh, Parsons. Yeah,
Yeah.
Parsons. Yeah. So, I mean, the top four there could be on the major leagues at any point in time. So, yeah. But in my opinion, it seems like this Memphis team is stacked for now. You know, like Yepez has been up and down. I'm sure that Ben Johnson down there could really use Yepez and his bat to make a run for the championship. I'm sure Yepez wants to be up. But this is a team that can probably make some noise and maybe contend for a AAA title.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And I mean, even as you go further down the line, if you've got guys like Chase Pinder and Kramer Robertson, who are kind of older prospects, but they're still going to be above average hitters.
Yeah. Okay, so we've already talked all the way through it, but someone to watch. Who should we watch as a fan of the majors who occasionally taps into the minors? Who should I watch down in AAA? And Adam, since you didn't get the last question, we'll start with you. Who you got for me? Who should I keep an eye
on? Honestly, for me, I think we're going to be looking at I think we talked about Joshua Baez last show as one guy who was looking at. Say what you want about hitters who are going to be striking out at a 35% rates.
Wait, hang on. I'm just going to interrupt you. So Baez, I just mean specifically at AAA.
Oh, in AAA. Oh,
yeah, because if Baez makes it to AAA this year,
no,
definitely
somebody. If Baez makes it to AAA this year,
sorry, I didn't make that very clear. That was my fault.
No, my bad. I should have heard you better. So I guess since we kind of went through the names, I guess I'll go with Matt Liberatore, just simply because we see the thinness of the rotation at the major league level right now. Wainwright won't be back for some more time, and we've seen Michaelis struggle, although I do think, and I said that in my previous article, I do think he'll turn it around. Either way, I do believe that Liberatore, it's only a matter of time before he gets his call to the major leagues. I think it was Blake who had that tweet, I think it was earlier this week, who mentioned that according to Enos' Stuff Plus, he's only second to Jordan Montgomery, I think, of all the pitchers, even on the major league roster. So I think given that, and especially the Cardinals' inability to kind of miss bats early on in the season, I think they'll find a premium in that. In Matthew Liberatore's really just complete 180 in his profile over the course of the offseason, and really has time as a Cardinal. Very impressive. It's only a matter of time.
Just a little information here to throw in, because I saw it come across but in the pregame today, and it could get lost. Ollie Marmol was asked about Liberatore a little bit and about the state of the rotation. And one of the things that Marmol said is that he wants to give everyone in the rotation at least 3 starts for evaluation. Now, 3 starts is not very many. And so that would be 1 more for Woodford, 1 more for some of these guys. So, I mean, Liberatore's time could be coming soon. Now, I'm sure Wainwright will get in there, and he's going to get more than 3 to get a look. Let's just be honest. And so is Mikolas. But, a couple of these guys, especially Woodford, if they need another guy, Woodford might not have long, both with Wainwright coming back and with Liberatore knocking loudly on the door. So anyone else from you, Kyle or Blake, 1 more player to watch down in AAA that we've already mentioned, or maybe it's someone else?
I'll take Mason Wynn, because literally I could sit there and watch him field routine grounders at short all day long and have a blast. Literally just watching him throw a ball to first is one of the most entertaining things about baseball you can watch. So just getting to see him every game, because they'll all be televised, is great.
Yeah, and the one that I would choose that hasn't been mentioned is somebody who's kind of made me a believer, and not just because of his performance in the World Baseball Classic, but the little I've watched of Guillermo Zuniga at AAA. I mean, he's impressive, and the Cardinals, you can never have enough relief pitching. So, keep an eye on him, because he could be in the majors at any minute, really.
Yeah. All right, let's scoot on down one level to Springfield, my hometown. Actually, never got to go to a game there because they didn't have the ballpark there when I lived in Springfield. We had to move away, and then they brought baseball to Springfield. But let's talk there. Springfield, same thing. Key prospects, and then other players to watch down there in Springfield. So we'll start with Blake. Start with you. Key players down in Springfield.
I mean, the Springfield team is not really loaded with top prospect talent. So you've got McGreevy, and then I mean, if you want to go further down, you've got a guy like Andre Granillo in the bullpen. Mike Antico and Matt Koperniak are two kind of fun outfield prospects. LJ Jones we can throw in there too because he's part of that 2020 draft and he can really hit. But in terms of like high-end talent, you're really just sitting there with McGreevy. It's a lot of like minor league free agent signings, Rule 5 guys, kind of older prospects filling in the rest of the staff.
Yeah. Anyone else that either of you two would add to that list?
Go ahead, Adam. Oh, sorry, Adam's muted. My bad. No. So for me, I guess I always seem to really like the older outfielders. Like that's kind of just a thing. So like watching Matt Koperniak hit, I'm anxious to see if he can continue to show what he's shown so far early on for Springfield. He's also played center yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fascinating thing. Mike Antico, I think a lot of people are really interested in because he made it to Springfield last year and was really impressive. And he's back there. He's a little bit older, but he's a fiery player that steals a lot of bases. And I think he's really interesting. I've kind of always been the dauber down guy in McGreevy. So that's, I'm anxious to see if because his command is whatever, but like I need to see him making strides with his fastballs the same way that we've seen Liberatore do that in this past offseason leading into this season. Like to me, I guess it just comes down to some of those older outfielders and then like Chandler Redmond. I have such a soft spot in my heart for those players. Some of those, what you might call an underdog, older prospects at a level that they're probably too old and too seasoned for, maybe getting a chance to push themselves into a AAA chance.
Yeah, I would agree with
you, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with the two of you guys. When Blake said in terms of like top tier talent, there's not really a whole lot at the level besides Michael McGreevy, and even then, I think McGreevy's more of a 4 or 5, 10, trending more towards a innings eater, more of a role guy. But I think like if you want to talk about how Kyle, you mentioned with the older outfielders with Chandler Redmond and Matt Koperniak, you can't really go wrong with with having extensive outfield depth, especially with what the Cardinals have. If you're going to be trading a potential Dylan Carlson down the line for starting pitching depth, it's just going to be filling in as you go on. It's just next guy up, and it's always going to be that player available for St. Louis. And if it happens to be Chandler Redmond, you've got that. He's off to a fantastic start, and I think he could absolutely be a piece in Memphis's team down the road this year, and even a potential Cardinal in September or even next year.
Yeah. Okay. Is because I looked through the Peoria roster here as well. I'm cheating. I'm skipping ahead.
Peoria is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. So my question for you guys is, because Peoria, which we'll get to, has a half dozen or more names that I recognize, and then we just talked about AAA being loaded. Is the Springfield roster? I mean, Double A is normally where a lot of your core prospects are. Ours are past that or too young for that. Does this represent a gap in the system, or have they just promoted so aggressively and have so many young players that Springfield right now is not really a gap, it's just a hole? Yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
I think it's a course correction. I think it's a stabilization and normalization. I've been thinking about this very thing quite a bit while gifting Jason. Okay. So I'm eager to actually talk about this. This is something I was hoping to eventually do Pat and actually get into.
Yeah, I set it up for you.
You're a king, Jason, is what you are. I think that we are finally starting to see for the first time the normalization of minor league baseball coming out of the 2020 shutdown. I really do feel like we are finally seeing that. Now, there's also this weird thing that happened where the Cardinals in the Rule 5 draft, the minor league stage of the Rule 5 draft, drafted a lot of guys. They drafted Kenny Hernandez and Comar and another Jose Martinez, who actually has been kind of a really impressive relief pitcher in just a couple outings. So what they did is they put all of those guys at Double A, a lot of those pitchers at Double A, and instead of promoting Dionis Rodriguez, who probably needed a little bit more seasoning, or Austin Love to Double-A, which would be the normal trend.
Right.
It kind of normalized. They kind of put themselves in a spot where it forced them to slow down what has been already aggressive development periods. So I think what we are finally seeing is the Cardinals maybe pulling the reins back a little bit, because they were one of the more aggressive teams, if not the most aggressive team coming out of the lost 2020 season. And I think we're seeing it normalize. Now, I do think that there is a potential gap there. But I also would think that there's a situation where in 2 months, some of that backloaded talent has mellowed its way into Double-A. That's what I think is going to happen. I think that ideally the Cardinals would want that to be Jervy, and I think they want that to be Tink Hence, and that's what I think. I think that they would want to have those guys aggressively promoted, like they did with McGreevy and Graceffo last year. I think that that's kind of their timeline. But when you have Dionis Rodriguez, who's filling 3-inning stints in your bullpen, and you still have Gustavo Rodriguez at Palm Beach, those are guys who are just one level behind where they would be if they were on a normal developmental schedule. And I think that there's a more normalizing and leveling with course correcting to come in the future.
Yeah. You guys got anything to add to that, or is Kyle right?
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. No, go for it, Adam.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it pretty much on the nose. I would say to a degree, it's also somewhat the fact that Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn have exceeded expectations as prospects. So just by nature, Jordan Walker skipped AAA, and you can make the argument that he probably could have been promoted earlier, like in 2022 to AAA, and not spent the whole year. But and Mason Wynn, same thing, top prospect, him already really showing well how good of a player he could potentially be. So just by nature, those two are, really got the promotions and were pushed up through the minor leagues pretty quickly. You already see Jordan Walker in the majors, but I think that was the big key point that you made, Kyle. I think it's really just a readjustment and more of a shifting of and a correction, like you mentioned, of the rule changes in terms of how we eliminated in some of the levels of minor league baseball, and you're kind of seeing that correction fully coming into fruition this year.
Yeah, no, I think Kyle was completely right, and especially about the part where there's going to be some kind of that backfilling into Springfield when guys get hurt or when guys go up. There's a lot of really good pitchers in Peoria, and then even then there's a lot of good pitchers in Palm Beach. So I think we'll see a lot of those guys coming up here pretty quickly.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say too, just to add to that, is first of all, I've been listening to Kyle talk about this subject now for a couple of years, and I agree with him completely. And it's actually good to see this sort of gap. And it's not an age gap. That's the other thing I'd say. It's not an age gap. I mean, we've got 21-year-olds that, all the way up to Memphis and in the major leagues. So it's not like they went through this period where they drafted poorly and didn't develop prospects, and so then now they've got a hole at Double-A. It's just holding guys back and promoting aggressively, because some of it was earned, some of it, like Liberatore, probably should have never seen AAA until maybe mid last season, so stuff like that was, like you say, a course correction that I think is getting everything back on track. And give it 2 months, and Double-A might be the team to watch. You never know. Mm-hmm. All right. Moving on down to Peoria. This fascinating roster that we have here. By the way, on the article, I'll try to post the rosters, or maybe here if I'm feeling ambitious, right here in the video, so those of you that are watching will get to see them. Key prospects at Peoria, and then from each of you here at this level, a player to watch that we need to be watching. So, Adam, I'll start with you. Key prospects at Peoria and your player to watch.
I have not Connor Scott. Wrong team. I don't write for the Marlins anymore. Victor Scott. Yeah, not Connor Scott. Sorry. So Victor Scott is someone I kind of looked at, and yeah, he's a little bit older for the level. He's 22 and at high A ball, but you kind of do like to see the profile, especially where he's showing a lot of discipline, especially at Palm Beach last year and limited plate appearances this year at Peoria. It is a long shot, especially with him being more of a 5th-round pick and a little bit older for the level. He should be performing this well, especially for a college signee. But especially out of the players thus far, he is performing the best out of any hitter, at least at Peoria. And I think he's probably the most exciting one so far, and probably has at least a decent amount of upside.
Okay, Kyle, who are you watching, and who should we be watching?
just another thought about Victor Scott, because I love Victor Scott the second. I think that there's a chance that he could be some type of like the left-handed swinging version of Mason Wynn out in center field. I really do. That his athleticism, he has the potential to be something special. I'll focus in on one person, and I love Austin Love. I want to make that clear. He's the one I find myself focusing on a lot pitching wise, but for me it's Jimmy Crooks. Catcher Jimmy Crooks, 4th-round pick out of Oklahoma, left-handed swinging catcher. I just like, he had a rough game the other night. He had a rough game framing. He had a rough game blocking. He had a rough game throwing. He had a rough game at the plate. And he never, while all of these things were going on that weren't going particularly well for him, he never really seemed to lose it. Like he never really seemed overmatched. He had his struggles, but he was doing well with handling his struggles. And reading about him in Oklahoma and watching him in Oklahoma, it seemed like there was two versions of Crooks. It seemed like he would only, if he was a good hitter, he wasn't a good catcher, and if he was a good catcher, he wasn't a good hitter. So I'm anxious to see how that kind of develops, and I feel like I'm already starting to see that. It might be projecting my own thoughts or other people's scouting reports, but like, that is a high-end catcher. That if he can put it all together at once, that is a high-end catcher in every aspect of the game. Game calling, game blocking, his arm, his pop time, and his ability to hit and drive the baseball. So he's still far away from it, but he would be the one on the hitting side that, other than Victor Scott, who I would be keeping a close eye on.
Yeah. Just for some context here, Crooks last year did see the majors, drafted last year, right? Wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was. Did see the majors. Jimmy Crooks did not see the majors. Did see playing time last year. I'm assuming with Palm Beach. Of course it was. Yeah. And I'm pulling up his stats here. A 149 WRC plus in limited plate appearances, 96 plate appearances, 3 home runs, good ISO, great walk rate. So the offensive tools are there, and I think we all kind of expect the defense to be there too. So, Crooks is those of you that were participated in the Viva Birdos community prospect rankings. Crooks came up a lot and had a lot of support. So, you got to keep your eye on. Yeah, Blake, who you got?
Yeah, so Adam and Kyle have done a great job covering the exciting hitters. So I'll just say literally the entire pitching staff is fantastic. And I could turn on a Peoria game and be fascinated by any pitcher who takes the mound. Because you got guys like Tink Hansen, Cooper Jerpy, even Austin Love in the rotation. A guy like Deonis Rodriguez, who probably should be in the rotation, is not right now. But a guy who's been really fascinating to me so far has been Ian Bedell. He's faced 20 hitters, struck out 13 of them.
Wow.
Gave up a home run, I think, in his last start, but who cares about that? That's not fun. But he's a guy, again, part of that 2020 draft, which just literally keeps getting better and better somehow. He's a guy who could be really electric. He's a guy who's been hurt a lot, so I'm excited to see what he can do when we start to get a larger sample on him. But he's definitely going to be a guy to watch, and he could be a guy who kind of rises up some prospect rankings here pretty quickly.
I'll bring him up because some of our major league fans might know him. I'm pretty sure he was a Rule 5 eligible pick, and I can't believe I'm going to try to say his name live on the internet. Inohan Paniagua, maybe.
Close enough.
Yeah,
Inohan Paniagua.
No, Paniagua.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Kyle. What's the story on him? Still down in A-ball, but was a name that surfaced last year.
They actually just announced today they had to put him on the IL. He's having some arm soreness.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go then. Yeah.
But,
those are his stats last year looked pretty decent. So so there he is.
Leading into the arm soreness, he's a kind of a svelte. He's like 6'2", svelte, right-handed pitcher who throws the fastball in the low 90s, but he's a crafty control first righty. We don't really use crafty a lot with right-handers, and he's a crafty thrower who can get in the mid 90s. But he can drop off a big curveball. Has a changeup that he's still developing, and he was a nice little bit of raw clay that was starting to get molded. That now is just kind of waylaying a little bit.
Okay. All right. One more level to talk about, and then maybe we'll hit the complex a little bit. Palm Beach, single A team. A lot of guys coming in right from the complex there. Who's your guys to watch, and who are the prospects down at Palm Beach? And Kyle, I'll start with you.
I mean, this is another one where it's like all of them, right? And this goes back to the point that we were just talking about how
oh yeah,
there are
yeah,
so many
outfielders. Yeah,
exactly. I guess. So we'll let Adam go with Joshua Baez, but
I changed
for
my
me,
answer.
I guess.
Go ahead.
For me, like Juan Bincho, who I believe is actually, he pronounces it Win Bincho. I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure I've heard him say that.
Okay.
The outfielder, he's just a fascinating athlete. He's a fascinating athlete who all of our eyes are on because he's a Twitter sensation.
Yeah.
Still super young, probably a doubles hitter with some surprise pop and some great speed, who has some interesting questions about potentially where he's going to play in the outfield and how he plays the outfield. But truth be told, when I look at those stats, he's the first name that I look for, even knowing, and all you have is a stat so far because they haven't played St. Lucie or Bradenton yet on MILB TV, and those are the only, I believe that those are still the only two Florida State League teams that have available MILB feeds. So it won't be until then that we'll get to actually see him with our eyes. But he's the one who I always immediately look for his stats to see how he's doing or how he did on a really great and exciting roster. So that's I'll say that's my steal.
Okay. We'll save you, Adam, because we know where we're going to go. Blake, who you got?
Yeah, so I'll stick with pitching again. I think kind of the two guys who were second and third round picks last year, and Bryson Motts and Pete Hansen, kind of different. Bryson Motts was a guy I liked when he was picked, but when I watched his outing in spring training and I saw that slider, he really just kind of popped for me. So I'm excited to be able to see him in the minors. He kind of carved up whoever he faced in his first outing. And then Pete Hansen too is kind of more of that pitchability guy, upper 80s, lower 90s fastball, but those 4 pitches for strikes will throw them at any time. Those are really nice back foot slider, really advanced college guys. So I could see both of those guys kind of tearing up Palm Beach and moving quick.
Yeah. And then the power hitter. If you want to go there, you can change your answer. If not, I'll have to talk about him. Adam.
I'll give. You can go ahead and talk about him. I'll change my answer just because.
No, please don't. It's single A.
No,
all I can tell you about Josh Baez is his name.
It's all good. No, I'll go with Bernal. Honestly,
Yeah.
he's probably. You guys will probably agree that he's probably the best catching prospect the team has had since Herrera. And that's obviously not a big time difference, but you do like to see him having some sort of competition coming up. Just to push him. And for me, he's more of a Logan O'Hoppe starter kid. He's got a great all-around game. I can totally see him being moved up to Peoria maybe at some point later in May or even June once his receiving skills come up to par with his hitting skills. But for me, I think he's going to be a potential replacement for Wilson Contreras. Just obviously, once Contreras' contract fills out, I do believe that Bernal will still obviously have at least 4 or more years of team control if and when he does reach the majors. But even then, towards the latter half of Contreras' contract, I think it'll be fantastic where you could see Bernal in a role where he is backing up Contreras and he is going to be his heir apparent. So I'm very, very excited for Leonardo Bernal. I do like a lot of 18-year-old prospects who end up playing in single A just because that's where you see a lot of the pop happen, a lot of the helium really take place. So I think especially for Bernal, really adding into that catching, that he's my favorite prospect out of Palm Beach.
Yeah. And I would also mention, I think Baez is worth a mention. Your Baez was a 2021 second rounder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
power hitter, had a really good season last year. One of these things where guys can, and Kyle and some of you can talk about this, they frequently start at the complex and then work their way into Palm Beach as the minor league season kind of progresses. And if I'm right, that's what happened with Baez, right? He started at the complex and then eventually debuted with single A Palm Beach. Is that correct?
So and then in his first at bat, he broke his hand. He took broke his wrist. That's right. And that was it. And then he, missed what 8 weeks or no, it was almost 6 full weeks, 6.5, 7 weeks, and came back. But yeah, look, it just depends. They're usually a little bit more conservative with the younger players. So for instance, Ryan Holgate is a fascinating subject because he was a second round draft pick in 2020 21, right? He was a 70th overall pick in 2021. Baez was 40 something, right? Am I wrong about that? Baez was 46.
54.
When? I'm sorry.
54. Baez was
50.
picked 54th. Yeah.
Damn it. And yeah, so anyways, like Holgate started with Palm Beach last year and was up and down between the complex and Palm Beach all last year. And he didn't even start the year with Palm Beach this year. So it's a very, very fluid situation down there with how they handle it. You know, sometimes they'll just give a guy like a week, and within like at the beginning of May, they'll give a guy like a week of at bats and just see how he does. And even if he does well, or even if he doesn't do well, they'll pull him back and get him some more seasoning at the complex. So it's just all about how they're evaluating at the complex with how the roster of Palm Beach kind of works out.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, so did Baez come back after that wrist fracture? He did. Okay. That's impressive. It's even more impressive to me. But last year, Baez had 3 home runs, a 254 ISO, a 170 WRC plus, and it sounds like there was a major wrist injury, involved there. And wrist injuries, if nothing else, can steal your power like nothing. So that's pretty impressive from a young hitter. All right, there's Palm Beach. Let's move on down. Who's at the complex that we need to know about that we might hear about at some point later in the season? Not at the major league level, but could make noise in the low minors. Give me some names, guys.
I guess I'll go first since there's crickets, but it's generally, I guess I want to kind of start off with a caveat that it's kind of hard to get excited about rookie ball and DSL guys just simply because of the lack of data, and you're playing in the backfields of, the Dominican Republic or in, the spring training. So I tend to wait till they reach Florida State League, but even then, I guess if there's a couple names, I guess we'll go with Jonathan Mejia. Just as, he's a young shortstop prospect who potentially could make his stateside debut later on this year, especially with either the spring training, with the complex league or in Palm Beach. Another one mentioned was we talked about earlier was Jose Suarez, right? With that, he's got he led the the Cardinal DSL league or team with ISO power as a 17-year-old last year. So it'll be interesting to see if he ever makes Palm Beach this year, or if plays out in the complex league for the rest of the year, and then next year he makes his Palm Beach debut.
Blake, you got anybody else?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked about pitching this entire time, but I'm just going to throw out some more pitchers. Alec Willis is super interesting. He's a guy, kind of a higher bonus, maybe high school draftee, maybe like the 10th round. Am I wrong on that, Kyle? Is he like a 10th round pick?
8th round.
8th round, close enough.
6th or 8th, I can't remember. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. But he's super exciting. He's again been hurt a lot, but he's had some really good numbers in a small sample size. And then another pitcher I'm going to be super interested to watch is Ruben Menez. He's a Cuban pitcher. He's 20 years old. Cardinals signed him like a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. He's reportedly has a 94 to 96 mile an hour fastball. Go-to breaking pitch is a slider. Signed for $425,000. So he should be interesting to watch. He's kind of I haven't seen the Cardinals sign an older Cuban player like him, I think, in a few years. So I'll be curious to see how he does. And I would imagine they'll start him on the complex level.
He was one of the first names that came to my mind. The Cardinals always seem to do pretty well finding those older foreign-born Caribbean players, and Menez is one of those players. And I'm going to keep an extra eye on him for that reason. Maybe for different reasons. One of the pitchers that I'm gonna try to keep an eye on, and I'm sure we'll see at Palm Beach soon enough, is Jose Davila. I was not impressed with him at all. Now he is one of the prospects that the Cardinals are very high on. One of the pitching prospects. They spent a bit of money on him in the international J2 signing period a few years back. And when I watched him, I was not impressed at all. And I know that he still carries a lot of clout in the organization. Now, when I say I'm not impressed at all, I am impressed that a 21-year-old kid can go to Palm Beach and pitch at all and not make a fool of himself. That blows my mind. But he just didn't seem like he was a primetime prospect to me. He didn't have flashy stuff. He had a good breaking pitch, but other than that, he wasn't. So to me, I find that fascinating because that's somebody who also I will be looking for positives with, maybe more so than other prospects. So he's like the first one aside from Menace that comes to my mind. And then a second baseman that I like, Samuel De La Rosa. I like his athletic profile. He had a pretty good year last year away from the full season affiliates. And I think that there's a chance that he could be a little something more. So those are the first couple names that come to my mind.
And Kyle, to touch on Davila as well, because I know he pitched in Venezuela over the winter, and I covered the winter leagues. He mentioned while he was there, he threw like 7 innings, didn't give up an earned run, 5 Ks, but he mentioned that one of the big things he was working on in Venezuela was that breaking ball. And I think after watching him a little bit, he doesn't always bury it as well as he should. So I'll be curious to see if he's made positive changes with that pitch.
Cool.
All right, let's move on to questions. And I might jump in here with some answers as well. And I hate to start with the last first, but we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll start with the Duke, who is a regular poster over at Viva Birdos. Hey, Duke, how's it going, man? I want to no, I'll just ask the whole question. Okay. So the question is this: should Mason win? And I think maybe we can all address this one because it's a Mason win question, so we can all have a shot at it. Should Mason Wynn be starting at shortstop for the major league team right now with Edman moving to second? Why shouldn't we put a world-class defense out there to go with our world-class offense? Isn't that a better way to cover for the weak pitching staff? So, Kyle, since you're our guest, and they don't get to hear from you quite as often as they definitely hear from me and Blake and Adam, what do you think about that question with Mason Wynn starting at shortstop, Edman moving to second with the pitching staff that we've got?
My answer is I love Mason Wynn as much as any human being on earth that is not related to him. I think the world of that kid. But there are still intricacies in his game at short defensively that are not world-class just yet. They're very, very close. But, we've seen the gold glove of it all of Brendan Donovan is, of course, a bit of a farce. But he's also, in this last offseason, has made huge strides. We've seen him already make some great plays, maybe the best plays ever made, playing second base the other night in Milwaukee, diving over the second base bag to make a play and a throw. I love Mason Wynn, and he has every chance to be that world-class defender. But, again, just give him some time. Adam brought up a great point earlier about how players, especially Wynn and Walker, have developed and kind of push the envelope of where they start the 2023 season at and how their development has personally changed maybe their trajectory entering the season. So, that arm is the best arm you're ever going to see in an infield for sure. But there's still little things that he needs to do to become more of the showstopper he's capable of being. And a lot of it's just cleaning up stuff. So that's my answer to that. We've got one prospect who's 20 years old. Let's give the rest of the 20-year-old prospects just a little room to breathe.
Yeah. Go ahead, Blake.
No, you're good.
You sure? Okay. So I agree with Kyle. To me, Mason Wynn, in my opinion, he's a great shortstop. He's a good player. Like he's a fantastic prospect. And I agree. I think eventually he'll be a plus defender. He's got that 80 arm, obviously, and with that above average bat, and he might OPS 750 or above as a major leaguer. I think that future value is entirely dependent on how much potential he's going to be able to extrapolate out of that rotational athleticism. And honestly, and combine that with that contact ability is really going to be the name of the game for his future and seeing how good of a player he'll really be. Evaluators have a run the nose at having him as a 50 or a 50 plus, but really because of that lack of power and that juice, I think he's going to really have to prove it at Memphis because before he's deserving of promotion, you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. I mean, what's the rush, essentially? You've got to ask yourself, is he better than Tommy Edman right now? And if he's not, is it worth starting the clock this early? I think the answers to both of those questions at this point are no. I think it'll take an injury or an offensive breakdown from Tommy Edman or Brendan Donovan at this point to really make sure that he's going to get an opportunity now. But and I think that might push the envelope and push the needle. But if I had absolute power, if I was Mozeliak in the team, I wouldn't be promoting Mason Wynn until he's shown improvement in that offensive profile. I think he'll be a good player someday. I think if you rush him too early, he might end up being more Edmundo Sosa than he is going to be like a more of a 800 OPS caliber playing shortstop. But I think if you give him some more time at AAA, I think he might end up being that prospect. And if you give him time, I think he'll end up overtaking Tommy Edman as the everyday shortstop.
Yeah, let's just see him hit AAA. Just hit the ball in AAA first. There's no need to rush him. And I mean, we're already trying to get everyday at-bats for Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman. And then apparently Taylor Motter needs a lot of at-bats in there as well. I don't want Mason Wynn sitting on the bench for Taylor Motter. So we can just leave him at AAA for a while and see what he can do next year if he can force his way into a starting role.
Yeah, that was kind of my take too, is that as much as I like Mason Wynn and I'm excited about him, I do not think that if you brought him up, that suddenly the defense would be that much better. I think that Tommy Edman might out-defend, I hate to put this on record. Tommy Edman might out-defend Mason Wynn in their prime. Like, Edman very well could be the best defensive shortstop in the league this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really feel like I'm going out on a huge limb to say that. And as great as Mason, as Wynn is, is he a Gold Glove caliber annual player? Yeah, we don't know that yet. I mean, we hope so. The arms there, the consistency with the glove, though, I just don't know. I think about when Edgar Renteria was first brought up. Now, Renteria and Wynn are very similar in some regards and very, very different in other regards. Renteria was a contact hitter who developed power, and Wynn is, I hate to say, it's a little bit more of a power hitter and not much of a contact hitter at this point. Walks more. So, but it took a long time for Renteria to settle in as a consistently well above average defensive shortstop. Now, he didn't have the arm that Mason Wynn has, but I don't think that kind of path would be all that different than Wynn's. 2-3 years from now, he might be better than Edman, but right now I think Edman wins a Gold Glove at shortstop, and there's no reason to mess with that. So, yeah. Okay, I love this question. We'll get to the funny one now because I want to ask a J-Dog, who is our version of Cardinals Gifts and might be Cardinals Gifts. You'll never really know, will we? He asks, how often does Libby hang outside of Ben Johnson's office asking if there's anything he needs to tell him? So, Kyle, is Liberatore constantly just outside of Ben Johnson's office asking if there's any new news or information? Are we that close?
I think he's been around the Cardinals organization long enough to know that sometimes promotions and demotions don't make sense. So he's probably not paying much attention. I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
Liberatore is a great teammate, as is Nolan Gorman, but both of them, honestly, it's kind of a fun little anecdote, are pretty well insulated. Like, they kind of do their own thing. They kind of, they're very friendly. They're, part of the team atmosphere. I don't know how to say it without making it sound like it doesn't, but like, he's a very driven and regimented human being. So taking the humor out of the out of it all, no, there's absolutely no way he's doing any of that or even joking around. He's kind of got that little bit of that Paul Goldschmidt mentality where it's just like, I'm just want to do my job. So that's I got nothing else. Go on. I'm sorry. Leave me alone.
Do you guys think? I'll ask this of Adam and Blake. Do you guys think that there's a chance? The only way that I guess let me ask the question this way. Is the only way that Liberatore comes up is if there's an opening in the rotation, or do you think they might just say, we can't leave him down here, he's got to pitch, we got to have him, and they potentially throw him in the bullpen?
I think there's got to be an opening in the rotation for sure.
Yeah.
I think honestly, if the starting pitching trend continues the way that it is, I think, like, for now, I agree with Blake. It's just going to be the case where you have to have an opening. But down the road, if this is continuing this way, and if Liberatore continues to shove in Memphis, I think you could see him knocking the door. In my opinion, it's only a matter of time before he gets promoted. I think, honestly, the way the starting pitching is going on early on, I think you're going to have to make a promotion and try to have a fresh face in the rotation.
Yeah. I've got more thoughts on that, but this is a minor league podcast, so we'll hold off on that. Moving on to the next one. Let's go with Blake on this one. Are there any non-prospects that you think, you know what I mean by non? He explains, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Any non-prospects that you think could have an outsized impact at the major league level sometime in the next year or two?
I feel like I could talk about this for a long time, but I like Matt Koperniak and LJ Jones again. I mean, it depends on how far down the list we want to go in terms of prospects. I feel like they're probably on a prospect list outside the top 30. It's just so how far you want to go. But
That
I
would
think
qualify for me. Yeah,
I think
sure.
Koprivnik's hit tool all around is nice. He makes a lot of contact, has enough patience, has some pop. As Kyle said, he played center field the other day. I think he's a really intriguing older outfielder. Now, I don't know where he would get a chance in the Cardinals outfield with how many prospects are there. But I think he's definitely one to look at. I think LJ Jones could make an intriguing DH candidate. He's not really much of a defender. He's kind of first base outfield and not really great at either one of those, but he's got a great hit tool. He's got a lot of power. He's already off to a good start in Springfield. Those would be two kind of bats to look for. And then I'm still pretty high on Logan Sawyer. I think that splitter, the mid 90s heat and the slider could really make him a good bullpen candidate, especially within the next year or two.
Kyle, you give every night. So let me ask you this question. This is from Strider 3791. Which Cardinals minor league players' early performances have most excited you so far?
Oh, it's not to keep talking about him, but it's Matthew Liberatore.
Yeah.
I've been critical of Liberatore because, especially at the end of the 2021 season, we started to see the best of him. We started to see him do what he's doing right now.
Yep.
Command is even though his fastball and sinker weren't the same shape that they are now, but we saw him have the velocity and we saw him use that velocity late in games. And we saw his breaking pitches start to develop the way that they were developing. His slider was better then than it is now, but like you could start to see the makings of it. And he did not show that at any point during last year. There was one start. It might've been his fourth or fifth start last year where I thought, oh my God, like, all right, Matthew's got it together. He's ready to go. But what I've seen, not just out of spring training, but what we've seen so far in Memphis has been that version of him. It was the step that I hoped he would take at the beginning of the 2022 season, that it just took him a year to make.
Yeah.
And Memphis has one more week of minor league baseball than everyone else. It's only like 4 games or whatever it is, but like they have more games than the other levels. So you get a little bit more of a taste from them. And for me, it's him, and it's not even close. By the way, Paul DeYoung just hit a ball, drove in Mason Wynn 107 miles an hour for a single. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Was it a breaking ball or a fastball? Do you know?
It was here. I just gifted it. It was a fastball down the middle.
Okay. Well, he's got to hit fastballs too. I saw you had something on a breaking ball the other day, like a double down the line or something. So yeah. We will see him in St. Louis soon. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Probably a couple weeks, but still, he's still got basically a whole spring training to go through. Okay. Let me see here. Let me go with Blake on this one, because this is something Blake and I have talked about a little bit. This is from Tommy Fanatic. He asked 2 questions, but let's focus on the pitching side. In general, do you think it's easier to teach a control pitcher to add velocity or a power pitcher to learn control?
God, this is so tough because I feel like you can't really even look at it in general terms. Like, you've got to look at what your player development department does well. And I know the Cardinals specifically, we've seen it with some guys. They like those control pitchers and they like to try to add velocity to it. We saw it with Gordon Graceffo. We saw it with Andre Palante. Maybe a little bit with Zach Thompson, although that could have been him just going to the bullpen. That got him the velocity uptick. But so I don't really know if there is an answer, honestly, to which one's easier as opposed to the other one. I think the Cardinals know what they want, and I don't necessarily like what they want all the time. I sometimes wish they would go with pitchers who had some louder stuff, but it does feel like they do that later in the draft sometimes, especially some of the relief pitchers. And then in terms of the contact and power, it's the same thing, or the discipline and power. We've seen Lars Nootbaar, we've seen Brendan Donovan. Guys who weren't really known for their power come up and then add power. And granted, you can argue, was that the Cardinals, or was that drive line, or is that the puck knob, or is it whatever you want to call it? But I think the Cardinals know what type they want, and it works well for them. I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer either way.
Yeah. I think for me, that question, it comes down to some of our history. Yeah, Kyle, I'll get to you. Don't worry about it. I see that hand. But is that,
I need a beer.
There was this run of Cardinals, pitchers that had really terrible control, but incredible stuff, and they weren't able to teach them to do it. But then you look at a guy like Sandy Alcantara, he had poor control and looked like a potential. I'm not saying this exactly. We didn't know what he was whenever he hit AA, AAA in Memphis. Poor control, high, elite stuff. Could they get that control out of him? Well, he's developed that with the Marlins, and give the Marlins credit, give Alcantara a lot of credit. But we haven't seen it. Haven't seen it with Hicks, haven't seen it with Reyes, but those are just a few examples. On the flip side, too, I haven't seen that many examples of power hitters that did not have good plate discipline in the minors that were able to develop it later in the major leagues. Now, there's a few, but that's not as common. But it really just depends on the player, and a lot of it goes back to what their skill set is. Sometimes you'll see guys like DeYoung or others that showed some plate discipline in the minors, not show it in the majors, and then learn it back again eventually. But the skill set was kind of already there. But Kyle, go ahead. I know you want to go. So yeah, share, man.
No, I just had an analogy a little bit. When I've never been good at math. I joke around about being stupid, but I cannot tell you how dumb I am. I am so stupid. And when I was in high school, I was even dumber than I am now, as hard as that is to grasp. And so I was never good at math. But all of a sudden, my sophomore year in high school, I was taking Algebra 2, which was a miracle in and of itself. And I had a teacher named Miss Shore at Bishop DeBerg High School here in St. Louis. And I got an A in that class. And she wasn't a pushover teacher. She just taught it to me. She taught it to the class in a way that I understood it. And that's how I think hitting's different than pitching, but that's how I view pitching. I think that when it comes to pitching, whether you're a power pitcher or a control pitcher, and you're trying to learn the opposite, I think it depends on the person you are and how you're being taught that thing. I think that baseball in particular is such a mental sport that even with perfect mechanics, you don't always get perfect results. And I think that it's the teaching and implementation that is important, specifically in pitching, that will get the most out of one side or the other. And that is projecting, because I am very stupid. Don't know if I ever got that point across. And that is always a beacon to me, that if I get the right person to teach me something, that I can make the most of my deficiencies.
Wonderful. Kyle, we don't.
And now you're all dead.
We think you're awesome.
Love you.
Love you too, Kyle. Okay, this one's for Adam. Going on here from THP0344. Hey, man, how's it going? Site consistent commenter over there. Adam, where does Jerpy or Herpy? Let's just go with Jerpy. Did we ever get an official word on how we say that? I mean, I think it's Jerpy, right? Isn't that what we're going with?
It's not Herpy.
It's not Herpy. All right. Well, Adam, where does Jerpy end the season at?
Yeah, so I think most comfortably he's probably going to end up at Springfield. I like the profile. He's going to be a fast riser given his age, and his profile. He's going to be that lefty with that mid-90s fastball and a plus slider. That's going to be coming at a premium. I think he could end up at AAA, especially if he pitches pretty well. It's going to be kind of a long shot to see that, but I was kind of musing about this and thinking about if the Cardinals are contending because of that profile, because he's a left-hander coming out of the bullpen and he's not a soft tosser. He can touch, he sits, I think, low to mid 90s, and I think he's teed as high as 96 or 97 in college. So that if that's the case, if St. Louis is contending, I can absolutely see the Cardinals potentially calling him up in September for a playoff run, pitching out of the bullpen. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility, but that has to be if the Cardinals are contending. And I think the 50 percentile outcome for this situation is that he's going to finish out in Springfield, but I think we can dream a little bit, right?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The first person to say that, I think it's a possibility. I do think, though, that there's quite a few lefties ahead of him that he's going to have to run his way through. Like we're talking about Liberatore. Liberatore in that scenario would probably have to be in the rotation. Otherwise, he would have a first shot at the second lefty role. And then maybe some really things we don't want to talk about would have to happen. Like, Thompson might have to get hurt or things like that, we don't necessarily want for that door to be open, but it could happen. This one's from Kism D, and this might be the last one, so I'm going to give it to Kyle here. Am I off in being more excited about the pitching prospects in our system than the hitting prospects so far? feels like we've had a lot of pretty exciting early performances by pitchers, and some of the hitting prospects have gotten off to slow starts. I think we can look at that in general terms, pitching versus hitting. What are you more excited about, or are you just excited, Kyle?
You know me, I'm pretty excited. I'm an easily excited person. I would say that what we have seen is a lot of those big name hitters are at the major league level. Not all of them, but are either at the major leagues or flirting with the level. So because of the hype that's surrounding a lot of those prospects over the last couple of years, and now that they're at the major league level and aren't really prospects, it's easy to say, all right, now we have Tink Hence and Cooper Jerpy and Gordon Graceffo, Bryson Moutts, Pete Hansen, Michael McGreevy, one of my favorites, Max Raychek, Ian Bedell, Dionysus Rodriguez. I think that the louder group coming is the pitchers. But I would remind everybody, too, that when it comes to pitching, it's just you don't know who's going to stay healthy. You don't know who's not going to stay healthy. But that's my personal thought. I think that the hitters right now are under the radar. I've been aggressive about Crooks. I've been aggressive about Bernal. Victor Scott, we talked about Mike Antico a little bit here and there. Austin Love, I've been aggressive about from a pitching standpoint. But I think that it's easier now. I think the next wave of potentially impact major leaguers are impact and I guess hyped prospects are the pitchers, because I do still think that there's that what might be viewed as like mid-tier or back mid-tier prospects like LJ Jones, some of those other names I've already thrown out that are a little bit low key, that are flying underneath the radar. But the higher dollar, higher named, bigger bigger props are the pitchers.
And I think that fits the drafting profile too. Like there was a run there from, let's say Carlson through like Walker, Wynn in 2020, where they drafted for a lot of first round and high round pick hitters. And those guys have raced through the system, and now they're at the major league level. I mean, you really can't forget that even Burleson and Walker, those guys are still prospects. I mean, they've reached the majors. We might not put them on prospect lists anymore, but they're of the same age as some of these pitchers, and then they kind of circled back around to their college pitcher model, and we're seeing a lot of those guys make waves right now. Graceffo through Liberatore, different model, but Jerpy and others. So yeah, it does seem like pitchers are on the rise. Last question here, and I'll throw this out. Just give me one answer. No description, no analysis. One guy. Who is your pick of last year's pitchers? Actually, I'm going to change the question a little bit. Who is your pick this year to make a Graceffo-like jump in the top 100 by the end of the year?
Are we talking just pitchers, or are we talking pitchers and hitters?
Yeah.
Well, the original question had to do with pitchers drafted last year, so I'm adapting the question a little bit, but probably stick with pitchers. Who's this year's Graceffo among the pitchers?
For me, it's
go ahead.
Got to be Cooper Jerpy for me. There maybe is one publication that had him in the top 100. I feel like he was like 96 somewhere.
Prospects Live.
Yeah, I think Prospects Live. But I think he's off the radar for most of them, and he hasn't pitched yet. But I wouldn't be shocked to see him end up in the top 100 and probably in the top 75, pushing his way towards 50 there.
Adam, do you have anyone else?
I was just going to say Bryson Mott's. I mean, I would have said Jerpy, but I think just simply because he was a first round pick, I feel like he's probably not a fringe guy. So I think maybe I would have just gone Bryson Mott just because he was a second round pick, and probably would have been, I think he'll probably have more. He has a little bit more helium, I think, just because of his, he's tees high 90 and he's got that plus sweeper. So, yeah.
Kyle?
I don't think they have anyone other than Jerpy. Jerpy doesn't count to a degree. But other than if the rumor is Pete Hansen's velocity has taken a small step forward. So other than Moutts, Jerpy, and Hansen, I'm a big fan of Max Raychek. I think he's not ever going to be a top 100 prospect. The only other name that comes to my mind is Alec Willis. If Alec Willis takes big steps, but they're going to treat him more like Tink Hence in 2022 than anything else. So I would say, aside from the early round pitching prospects from the 2022 draft, that they really don't have anyone.
McGreevy couldn't become a top 100, barely, pushing it like Graceffo. Of course, he would have had to have already added the velocity, which he added some, but not a ton. So.
It's the shape and the command of it. Now, this is where Graceffo gets in trouble too, because Graceffo throws a lot of strikes and almost too many, and his fastball is kind of weird. But it's going to take an off season for McGreevy to put himself in that spot. It's not going to happen this year. Like even that first start, he got out of trouble and he handled himself pretty well, and I think he's going to do okay repeating AA. But Baseball America, I think, still has him right outside the top 100. Baseball America loves him still. So McGreevy is always a chance because you tend to lean on the players that have pedigree and first round pedigree, but there's just a lot there for me to say McGreevy.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, that's a little over an hour, and I want to thank you for what was a great conversation. I learned a lot today about names I'll probably forget about, but that is the Cardinals minor league system, and it should be a good year in the minors, and it's definitely worth paying attention to. And we'll have obviously lots of content on the site, and you can always follow Kyle. Kyle, give him your Twitter username because I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, it's at C70. You can find me. You can find me over at Discord or something. I don't really know.
Yeah, at C70. You can always follow Kyle there. That's not true, but those of you that know Kyle's joke will get it. So just search for Kyle Reis, and your dirty. What was it this year? Dirty 8,072.
It was pathetic, and I hated it. Check out the Cardinal Nation. They did a prospect list. It's the top 50. Brian Walton and Blake Newberry took part in it. I would subscribe and check that out. Yeah.
So you guys know where to find the other two with Blake and Adam on the site. But I thank you guys for coming in and providing some great content. And this was recorded Thursday. We'll post Saturday. And if you have any other questions, these guys are available to answer questions in chat, or I can send questions off to Kyle. So anything else that comes up, let us know, and we'll get answers to them. But for Adam and for Blake and for our good friend Kyle, it was great to have you guys with us, and we will see you on Viva Birdos today. Have a wonderful day.